All right, so we're going to be continuing in Daniel chapter 4. We ran way short on time last week and ended up going over part of this, but we're going to go back through a little bit of it. So in Daniel chapter 4, we see this second dream that Nebuchadnezzar had that he was looking for understanding and interpretation on. Like the dream that he had in Daniel 2, he was seeking for understanding. It had troubled him significantly. The other interesting thing, as I mentioned last week, the note there in verse 4, it's written in the first person. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house. Essentially, what it appears is that this was some sort of royal edict that was sent out from the king to his peoples, explaining how this dream had happened, how Daniel gave an interpretation of it. And that adds a little bit of a different perspective, I guess you might say. It shows that even though this pagan king was he was loyal to his gods and whatnot, but he had come to understand and respect Daniel for the perspective and the insight that Daniel had to these dreams, to understanding them.
He recognized Daniel's God.
He recognized, yes.
But still wouldn't convert.
And you know, that's definitely interesting in the perspective of it. One of the other interesting things that comes out of this, and a little bit of the backstory, if we go to Daniel 4 and verse 17, this matter is by the decree of the watchers and the demand of the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. A little bit of backstory here. Nebuchadnezzar's father, and I can't remember his name right now, drawing a complete blank on it, but had come from nothing. He wasn't of royal blood. He wasn't of, any pedigree, so to speak, but had come to be the ruler of Babylon prior to Nebuchadnezzar. And when we think about that in the context of the Most High, God manipulates politics, kingdoms, rule, war, and through the centuries has given power to some interesting individuals that rule and have ruled different kingdoms, different monarchies, and people that will acknowledge God. God has given them positions and authority. In the case of this dream, we see that God's sovereignty set Nebuchadnezzar back for a while. Made him wander in the wilderness like a wild beast for a time, and then put him back into his kingdom. And even that in context is kind of surprising. You know, in the kingdoms of that age, it wouldn't have been surprising at all to see someone else step in and Nebuchadnezzar never have a chance to come back and retake his kingdom. But when God says this is how it will be, that's how it will be. So, Daniel 4.
I've often wondered, when he had the dream, if he turned to God and asked for mercy, would that have happened? We'll never know.
Yeah,
Well,
maybe. Yeah, you know, in the context of the way it's written, it doesn't happen immediately. It happens a year or two down the road when the king's on the rooftop of his palace, feeling a little proud of himself. Is then when God says, "Okay, now the time has come. You get to go wander in the wilderness like a wild beast." And even the timing of that, you know, is interesting in the perspective of God didn't put that into place immediately. We'll see later in the chapter 5 lesson where God's already got another kingdom waiting outside the walls to take over Babylon. As the handwriting's on the wall, they're already in the process of, you know, taking the kingdom of Babylon. They're ready to raid at that moment.
God's told his prophets lots of things that they never came to fruition to see, but has always said it's going to be there.
Yep.
So it's like.
Yep. All right. So Daniel 4:19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was perplexed for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. The king spoke and said, "Belteshazzar, let not the dream or its interpretation trouble thee." Belteshazzar answered and said, "My lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation of it to thine enemies. The tree that thou sawest, which grew and was strong, and whose height reached unto the heaven, and the sight of it to all the earth, whose leaves are fair, and its fruit much, and in it was fruit for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowls of the heaven had their habitation. It is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong, for thy greatness is grown, and reached unto the heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth. And whereas the king saw a watcher and a holy one coming down from heaven, and saying, Hew down the tree, and destroy it, yet leave the stump of its roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and bronze, and the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which is come upon my lord the king, that they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, that they shall make thee to eat grass like oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew of heaven. 7 times shall pass over, till thou know that the Most High ruleth the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomever he will. And whereas they commanded, leave the stump of the tree roots, thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee, after thou shalt have known the heavens do rule. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if there be a lengthening of thy tranquility. All this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. And the king spoke and said, Is not this great Babylon that I have built for my house of the kingdom by the might of my power, and for the honor of thy majesty? While the word was still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven, saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee. And they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass like oxen, until 7 times shall pass over thee, until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomever he will. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and did eat grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. And at the end of days, Nebuchadnezzar lifted up mine eyes to heaven, and at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes to heaven, and mine understanding returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him who liveth forever, whose dominion is everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stand at his hand, and say unto him, Why doest thou? At the same time my reason returned unto me, and the glory of my kingdom, mine honor and brightness returned to me, and my counselors and my lords sought unto me, and I was established in my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added unto me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth, and his ways justice, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase. Even within this section here, verse 34, and at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, it's clearly referring to him in the first person, and gives additional credibility to the statement. You know, if this pagan king is going to acknowledge that the God of heaven sent me out to wander in the wilderness like a beast, to say that the God of heaven does what he will with the kings of earth, that shows a different level of understanding, especially for a pagan king to confirm that, to give it credibility, and clearly, also giving from the writing perspective of the king, telling the interpretation that Daniel had told him. And then to say that, a year later he was on his roof, and, in the context of this, he was a little full of himself. I think of the verse, pride goeth before a fall. He was a little full of himself, and had already been told this vision, had already been told the understanding of this dream. And in that moment, he came to understand it. And I think that speaks in a powerful way how God works in the kingdoms of men. I don't claim to understand all choices of God in our political spectrum. But I think at times our political leaders can get too full of themselves, and God says that it's time for you to be done. There's some others I wish that, would be done. I don't know, whatever. That's neither here nor there. But the fact that Nebuchadnezzar in this time understands and sees God's providence over the kingdoms of earth. And Babylon was one of the most powerful in its day. Yet, as we transition from chapter 4 into chapter 5, Lord willing, next week, we're going to see a time after Nebuchadnezzar is gone, but Daniel is still there. A time when that kingdom gets full of itself again. The co-regents at that time get ahead of themselves, and the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians comes and takes over. But in these situations, these kings, as well as us, as we go through our own lives, we can acknowledge God's providence in the world, acknowledge that we're here to honor Him and serve our role. But if we get a little full of ourselves,
I think this is with God saying you should put vote for us, but pray for somebody to be in power that's godly.
yeah,
Because the people, though there were some in secret worshiping their own gods, even priests were in secret at times in the
Right.
Bible worshiping different gods, thinking they were not seen. But the people are quick to follow the God that made the king.
yeah,
They always are.
Yep.
And so if you don't put the right person there, then they're quick to go.
Yeah.
They want to go where they feel like the safety is,
yeah,
instead of relying on, and that's still the same truth today. I mean, you've got Trump who says believe in God. So we have a nation that's trying to come back to God, but is not there.
yeah,
And that influences other nations. So it's what happens when he's not president.
Yeah.
And when somebody else is, and if they don't,
yeah.
then the world will go with, oh yeah. I mean, the ease of the manipulation that the world's willing to go and do.
Yeah, no doubt. And you know, the influence of leaders when it comes to other nations, you know, I think most specifically of our nation's support for Israel, most of the last few centuries, you know, especially the last 50, 75 years, generally speaking, our nation has supported Israel. Based on what Scripture says, those nations that do support Israel will be blessed by God. Yet we see some in the political realm, some especially in the academic realm,
Oh, yeah.
that are so anti-Israel, and I don't understand it.
I think it's because that's like a conversation I had with Tori. She goes, no, you don't see what they're really doing. And I'm like, I think you better take a step back. It doesn't mean that other people haven't been hurt on both sides. It's
Yeah.
costly. That's
Yeah.
the way war has always been, just like there's always been some form of slaves.
Yep.
But if
Yep.
it's God's will, you know, then that's why my dad said he asks forgiveness every day. But if you elect a leader and that's what your leader says, then you go. He said, I don't ever want to condone killing, but if God put me there, and that's what my leader,
Yeah.
if God says to do, but
I always look at it as what kind of Christian people are we to not do anything at all? I look at the Holocaust.
Yeah.
You know, the United States knew what was happening
and then they finally go in the
and
end.
chose to do nothing for a couple of years.
Well, one of the best stories that I think I've ever read about that era is the history of Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Oh, amazing man.
And some of the storyline of that is, you know, as a pastor, as a theologian, he felt very conflicted within himself to do what was right, because at some point,
Initially, when he
At-
first started, he said,
at some point, that meant conspiring to kill someone.
well, I think
who
the
was-
turning point was when Hitler spoke in one of the churches and told the preachers what they were going to do to support him.
Yeah,
And that's what, I think that was the turning point for Bonhoeffer.
yeah. But you know, sometimes in those situations, there's got to be a line drawn in the sand, and okay, this is just too far.
But look, I mean, I am not praising anything about the Holocaust, but look at what all came out of it. There's more than Anne Frank. There's more than this. There's the true story of was written by a girl, her brother's keeper, and that just brought me to tears. I mean, it was where the children's camps were, and she and 2 other people were the kids trying and working to escape for a long time. And there's just so much that came out of that other people do see and know now. There's some people that don't ever believe that it happened ever.
Oh, I know there's a
And-
problem with that.
So, I mean, they think it's just made up government stuff, but I also believe that, you know, God had us wait years before we would go in, because that's what was laid upon, you know.
I get fired up when people start calling people like Trump and Nazi. I just get so fired up because the stupidity.
They don't understand,
The
well, they do, the
stupidity of
stupidity,
that.
the ramifications of their words, what they're actually saying, and that it's, yeah.
Yeah. Let's close for now.
Have any of you been through the Smithsonian, the Holocaust section of the Smithsonian?
I was through part of it a couple years back, and yeah, it's pretty powerful.
The Washington DC one, the Fordland schools anyway, take their kids through that. They raise money and then they take a train out of St. Louis and
That's
go
marvelous.
and take them through it. And my niece, who, I'm not saying she's ignorant, but she came back and she was just in tears. And the magnet she brought me, it was about the only thing left out of the blood and was she brought back a picture of just shoes that were
Yeah.
worn and bloody, and
Huh.
and for her that meant a lot to her. She's like, well,
Some
it
of
was,
them this long.
well, and all of them just different. So it meant a lot that that's all that's left of the fire, everything that was done to them. And I think
Yep.
that was an eye opener to her. And I want to say that's the year she accepted Christ. And
Interesting.
so, I mean,
had a
it's,
cousin, a very determined girl, and their offense was that her father was a doctor and he treated some Jewish people. And they hauled them to a concentration camp and separated her mother from her dad. She was 5 years old and was tattooed on her arm at age 5.
Wow. Brian, would you close us in prayer?
Our kind of most precious Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for watching over us, protecting us, keeping us safe. Thank you for the word that you brought to us this morning through David. Just be with the pastor this morning and allow him to have the strength and wherewithal to make it through. And if there's anybody in the congregation who don't know you as their Savior, well, we ask that you can open their hearts and open their minds and allow them to make that decision. These things we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
my brother.